What's up, everyone? My name is Matthew Dale, and I am here to help you play better, sound great, and understand more. If you're joining me for the first time, welcome to the channel. If you have seen me before, then welcome back. Today's topic is going to be dealing with FRFR, whether that's an FRFR system like a modern-day PA or FRFR cabinets that we are using with our modelers, and if you're like me, that would be like an Axe-Fx or an FM3 or an FM9 or a Helix or a Kemper or that stuff as well. So first, let's get a couple of misconceptions out of the way. Using an FRFR cabinet or going through an FRFR speaker is not going to magically make you sound better for whatever particular reason. FRFR stands for full range flat response. So it's really just giving us a definition of what the speaker is meant to do. And when we say full range, we're talking 20 hertz roughly to 20,000 hertz roughly. That's the scope of human hearing at its best. And the flat response means that the speaker would be able to reproduce those low frequencies around 20 hertz just as well as the mid frequencies and the high frequencies. They would be reproduced at roughly the same level, giving you a flat response. Now, just at face value, this actually doesn't give us any benefits being guitar players because the speakers that we usually play through, i.e. guitar cabinets or guitar speakers, do not have a full range or a flat response. Something like a Celestion Greenback really kind of starts to roll off around 100 hertz, maybe a little bit above, and then really kind of cuts off around 5,000 hertz. That's a very limited scope of the spectrum that we can hear. So oftentimes when people think, modeling or digital or FRFR, they think of this shrill, high-end frequency stuff happening that really isn't so much a result of the digital part, but it's more of a result of producing those frequencies that are then represented within an FRFR system. And they wouldn't be in a system that's including, guitar speakers on the end of the chain. I've got a pretty good story about this as well. So a few months ago, I was sitting in with one of my friend's bands, and they came over to my studio to rehearse. And I told him, he was using a Kemper, I said, hey, you don't need to bring a guitar cabinet with you if you don't want to for rehearsals. You can just go ahead and plug straight into my board and run through my systems. In my studio, I'm using QSC K10s. And they are, a full range, flat response, pretty good quality PA speaker. And it's what I use to dial in my tones as well. So sure enough, he said, yeah, that sounds great. I can bring less gear. Well, when he came in, he turned his cabinet modeling on and we plug him into the system and he hears his tone and he's like, wow, this is very different than what I'm used to, which of course it is because he's usually going into a power amp and then into a guitar cabinet. So going FRFR, you're going to initially hear all the extra low end and high end that's in your guitar chain. Now, another misconception is that we're trying to achieve some kind of amp in the room tone within these systems. Now, we are trying to go for good tone, and we'll get to the good tone part here in a bit, but amp in the room is really kind of this different phenomenon. One, we'll talk about position here in a little bit, but typically you've got whether it's a combo amp or maybe a half stack, that's not exactly going up to your ears. That's going to go more towards the lower part of your body. So you're going to hear things different. You're going to perceive things different there. Typically, a lot of guitar amplifiers are really loud. And we've got a lot more control over an FRFR with the loudness that we are putting out. So generally, in my experience, all of my guitar amps have always run a lot louder than I would typically run my studio speakers, whether that be my monitors up here or my K10s that are down on the floor. And the final note I'll say on that is that when we dial in IRs, we also have another part of the signal, which is a microphone. So all of our IRs are also shot with a microphone. So really what we're hearing when we listen through guitars through one of these speakers, especially if we're using cabinet modeling, which you should be, is our guitar plugged into, pedals or effects, into an amplifier, into a speaker cabinet, and then mic'd with a very particular mic. And that mic matters. The distance that mic was used when capturing matters. The environment that it was in matters. All these things really matter, which is why it's going to be different than an amp in the room experience, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be a bad experience. So with all of these things, why would we want to run FRFR? And really the answer is for convenience and consistency. The convenience part is pretty easy to recognize since, it eliminates the amount of stuff that we would potentially need to take to a gig. If I go to a venue that has a nice PA system and I can just run, direct XLRs to front of house, then, I could just take my FM3 and I would be good to go. Now, as far as consistency is concerned, because we're using systems labeled FRFR with a, relatively speaking, full range flat response, we can dial in our guitar tone with that in mind that will play nice across a lot of different systems and speakers. If we dial in a great guitar tone in our studios through an FRFR, chances are that when we go to a venue that's running, nice quality PA speakers, that it's going to sound really good and it's going to be really easy for the engineer to handle, giving everyone a better experience. But it's really within how to deal with that full range that can separate really good guitar tone from really bad guitar tone. So here's some tips and tricks for dialing in for FRFR. I'm going to give you the first general principles first, and then we'll dive into the software and I'll show you how I do it in the Axe-Fx stuff. So the first tip that I will give you is to be loud. You want to be dialing in your tones at roughly gig volume, which might look like 90 decibels or so. The Fletcher-Munson effect tells us that human hearing perceives different frequencies at different loudness levels. So if we want to dial in for the best tone live, then yes, turn it up. Another thing to take note of would be, what is the position of your speakers in your space? Are they up on speaker stands, or are they, down on the floor as a floor wedge? Both are a little bit different, and they're definitely different than, say, a guitar speaker cabinet that, like I said earlier, is pointing at your feet or at your ankles. It's going to be very different. You're going to perceive the high end a lot differently. And if you do have your speakers on the floor tilted at an angle, chances are those speakers are actually going to build up more low-end frequencies, especially if they're up against a wall. So those are a couple of environmental things that I want you to be aware of when you're dialing in FRFR. The next thing that sort of bridges the gap from here into, the software, the Axe-Fx stuff that we'll get to in a second, would be having a couple of really good go-to IRs. The IR matters so much in this stuff, where it can really sort of make or break your tone. And moving from one IR to the next within a preset with amps that are dialed in to suit one IR may really sound terrible on another IR. Luckily for you, I've already done some homework for you. I've got a bunch of my favorite IRs listed in my Fractal Favorite Amps and Cabs guide that you can find in the link in the description below. So you could use that as a really good starting point to find some IRs that you really like. Now, if you want to take this a step further, you could also hit the link right below that to check out my templates. I've got 10 of my favorite amplifiers dialed in with my favorite IRs to give you great tone almost immediately. Just drag and drop and bam, you're set to go. So if you want to check that out, again, that is in the description below. Okay, so now on the software or on the Axe-Fx side of things, here is my general chain. I've got, of course, my in and out blocks and my amp blocks. I'm gonna dial in a Fender and a Marshall here for this example, and then of course, we have a cab block if we're going direct, if we're using FRFR and not using a guitar speaker cabinet on stage. We need the cab block in here, most of the time, 99.9% of the times. Sometimes with clean tones, you can get away with not using a cab block. Check out some of Brett Kingman's videos on the Axe-Fx, and he gets like an 80s direct console type of tone on his Axe-Fx without using a cab block, and that's kind of interesting. So now the first thing I do before I go up setting up tones or dialing in tones is really get my cabinet in check. I already mentioned the importance of IRs earlier, and if you can just have one, if you could have, say like a Desert Island IR or something like that, for me, it would be a great set of greenbacks. So I'm going to go up to my picker, and I have these organized with the colors, so green for greenbacks. I know the Bogners are redbacks, but you get the idea. And these, the Marshall Checkerboard Pre-Rolla G12H55, a lot of stuff there. I've got that. That's Factory Bank 2, 761, and then my other one in tandem that I use with that is the one that's shot with the 121. So it's 761 and 763. Those are my preferred greenback IRs inside of this. Yes, there's like 2,000 IRs. I could narrow it down to just one set of cabinets, and it's these guys for me. Your mileage may vary, but I really like these cabinets. But I don't like them right in this configuration. One, I do like to pan them hard left and right. That's just for my, stereo benefit. I like that. You could also mix them in mono and do that sort of thing. And then over on the preamp side of things, the filter is already set up, you know, to really go FRFR, 20 hertz and 20,000 hertz, but I don't want all of that information. I want significantly less information. I want everything above 80 hertz and everything below 8,000 hertz. Now, going from 20,000 all the way down to 8,000 might seem like a pretty aggressive cut, and when I first got into digital modeling, I thought it was too, but actually it's not enough, and we'll see a little bit later. I'll also change the slope down here to 12, so I've got a 12 decibels per octave. I got a pretty aggressive slope on the side of 80 hertz and 8,000 hertz. Now, after that, then I'm actually ready to start dialing in my amp. I've got my cabinet taken care of. Now we can start with the amp. So this is the Fender Twin, or as per Axe Effects, double Verb vibrato channel. I'm using my McCarty 594 middle position here, and this is what it sounds like right off the bat. So things sound pretty good stock. I prefer to have less bass in this because I got my speakers turned up quite a bit. And there's a bit of woof down there, so I want to take out bass, and I've gone all the way down to 2 with this amp, you know. That cleans up a lot of stuff there. I'm really kind of getting a little bit more into that Fender realm now. And then I might do a little bit of the Magic 6s. So we'll do that on 6 and maybe that on 6 as well. And then, you know, dial in to taste. Now let's take a look at the Marshall. This is the JM45. And this is a pretty loud amplifier, so I'm gonna move it down to, let's see. That should be pretty good. Again, pretty bass heavy, right? A lot of these are, because guitar cabinets were never really good at recreating bass, so early amp designers put in a lot of bass in their amplifier. So again, I'm going to turn this down probably to 2 or so on the bass. I could even go probably as far down as nothing. I like that quite a bit, maybe just at 1 for all you at home. And usually with like a Marshall, like a Plexi style or something Marshall-y, I like to do the same thing, kind of boost the treble up and the mid up. This isn't so much a guitar tone as it is, you know, dialing in guitar tone with FRFR, so take it with a grain of salt. I like the sound of that. That sounds good. And let's drive this a little bit more. That's the bridge pickup. Still has a lot of nice low end. It's still thick sounding, but I'm getting all of the excess bass out of the way for my bass player for a stage. Now the next thing that I would do, again, for those rogue frequencies, is pull in a parametric EQ. I have a separate video on parametric EQ, which you can check out. I will link it in the end screen at the end of this video. But if you don't want to go through the process of really EQing an IR, just doing a simple blocking filter on either side of this parametric EQ is going to be a great starting point. So blocking over on the first band and then the second band, and then this is where I make more aggressive cuts. Let's do 24 decibels per octave on either side, and let's pull this down to 100. And let's pull this up to 6,500 is usually where I start with this stuff, but I'm actually going to go down to 5,000 so you can hear what that sounds like as well. So here's the Marshall parametric EQ on. And let's go over to the Fender with the parametric EQ on. Again, we're going through the same IR. I'm going to switch to my neck pickup. Doesn't doesn't sound like we're missing anything with those aggressive cuts, right? It still sounds good. Now let's go ahead and dial this back one more time. This time let's go to 5,000. It still has some nice brightness to it. Let's hear the Marshall. So I'm really not sacrificing a ton of high end there. If you're listening on a lower volume amount, it might sound a little bit dull, but at higher volumes, it actually sounds really good. Now, the last thing that I would do, because going direct or using an FRFR can sound so dead sometimes, is definitely add a bit of reverb. Now, I personally really like the sound of reverb. If you are not much of a reverb person, still go ahead and throw in a reverb here or there. Let's just pull up this stock medium room and let's just hear what this sounds like now. Again, I'm on the Marshall still. Now let's go over to the Fender. So just a little bit of extra space can really get you in the realm of, feeling like it is a part of the room that you're in. So there you have it. I hope you learned something. I hope you found some of that stuff interesting, and I hope you use that to dial in better tone for yourself when using FRFR speakers or going into a full range front of house system. Again, feel free to check out all of the links that I mentioned in this video in the description box below. And if you haven't already yet, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. My name is Matthew Dale. Play better, sound great, and understand more.